Welcome to Pretty Lies and Alibis. Let's seek the truth and travel the long road to justice together. What you know, Alibis? Welcome to another episode of Pretty Lies and Alibis. I'm Gigi. Good to have you here. It's Wednesday already. The days in December just fly by. Before you know it, it's going to be Christmas. I've got to get my shopping done. I don't know about you guys, but I'm kind of a last minute person. And then I cross my fingers and hope to God things can be delivered before Christmas. I may have to actually go out to the mall, which I hate. We're going to jump right in. Music fact of the day. The song Red Red Wine by UB40 was actually written by Neil Diamond back in 1967. He liked their version with the little reggae style so much that when he sings it their way instead of the way he wrote it. Yesterday was Charlie Adelson's sentencing. It's a mandatory life sentence. Before he was formally sentenced, they gave him an opportunity to make a statement. He said he wanted to. He stood up and said, I would just like to say I maintain my innocence, but you're still going to the pokey for life. So bye-bye. I want to focus on Phil Markel's victim impact statement. It was a little bit hard to hear if you watched that yesterday. He was attending through Zoom and gave a victim impact statement on behalf of the whole family. It was hard to hear, so I shoved my AirPods way down in my ears, turned it all the way up, and I think I've got pretty much everything he said. If a word or two is off, I apologize, but it was hard to hear. Then we're going to talk about the estrangement of Dan and Wendy's boys, Benjamin and Lincoln, from the lives of the Markels as a whole. A lot of you guys have commented about the last episode where we went through those emails that Donna sent to Wendi. It's so clear that Donna was the ringleader of spewing a lot of this venom towards Dan. The emails made that very clear. And then I got to thinking, Charlie's living the bachelor life. Yeah, he has a kid, but at the same time, he's driving a Ferrari. He's making millions of dollars a year. He's got girlfriends on each arm, plenty waiting in the wings, I'm sure. So why would he throw all that away just to have his sister move down to Miami? I don't think Charlie could have cared less at the end of the day. I think it was a Donna thing. Charlie and Donna very close, maybe even closer than Wendi and Donna. I don't know. That's just kind of my take on it. Charlie wanted to make his mom happy. Charlie would definitely hang out with the wealthy, but then he also had this other side where he would hang out with people who had connections, clearly, because that's how all this came to be. But why would he risk everything? I'm not sure that I'm convinced that Charlie really cared at the end of the day where Wendi lived. Charlie was doing his own thing. But where does that come from? Donna. Look at those emails. You see that Donna really was the ringleader in spewing this venom towards Dan. She was thinking up crazy ways just to get under Dan's skin, to kind of drive him crazy and almost to punish him for being the father of these boys. A lot of you have commented and said that after hearing those emails, you had some sympathy for Wendi because it was clear in that one email that Donna seemed to think that Wendi was not going to take her advice on these wackadoodle ideas she had. And she just tells Wendi, it's time for you to fight. We fought, we've lost income, blah, blah, blah. I really think at the end of the day, Charlie just made his mom happy. And I think maybe there was a little thrill in being the one that could arrange for this to happen, on having those rich friends as well as friends that had connections to criminals. I don't know. It just makes no sense. But at the end of the day, the only time he'll come out of that prison is when he's dead in a body bag. I think it's very likely Donna's going to live out the rest of her days just like her son behind bars. Will we see more? Who knows? Some of you think no. Some of you think maybe. I'll say this. Prosecutor Kappelman is like a master chess player. But you think about how vicious and terrible these emails were. Can you imagine behind the scenes when it's just them sitting there talking, or phone conversations that weren't wiretapped? These boys are 13 and 14. In 4 years, Ben will be of legal age. You think about it, Charlie's going to be in prison a lot longer than those boys were ever underage. Phil Markel gave a victim impact statement on behalf of the entire Markel family. It says, my name is Phil Markel. Dan, my only son, was born October 9th, 1972 in Montreal, Quebec. During that time in Quebec, husbands were not allowed to actually be in the delivery room during the child's birth. However, since the obstetrician was a very close friend of ours, I was allowed to experience the most amazing of moments, the birth of my son. I'll never forget the emergence of his head and then those shoulders of an NFL fullback, a boy of 10 pounds. There I was, holding in my arms this gift of life, my bundle of absolute sheer joy. From the time he was a child, my son had tremendous energy, intelligence, and great warmth. Dan had a vibrant, fun loving personality and lived life to its fullest. Danny loved to socialize, dance, cook, entertain, and play sports, and dedicate himself wholeheartedly to everything he did. He always looked to that which was true and to achieve better results in every activity he did. This desire of improvement and commitment to excellence was a defining characteristic of his short life. I fondly remember taking Danny skiing up the hills of the mountains in Quebec when he was just 2 years old. He rode up the mountain holding onto the T-bar and then coming down the ski hill yelling with great joy, "Faster, Daddy, faster." As he grew older, he played hockey at the local park. To improve his skating skills, he requested to take a speed skating lesson with a local coach who was from Russia, and he had a reputation of being very tough. Dan persevered, and after every hockey lesson, he came off the ice with a red face, totally out of breath because he always gave it his all. About the age of 13, Danny developed the idea that he was going to Harvard University for his college education. He discovered that the acceptance requirements for Harvard were not only with grades, but also work for the community and charitable work. To achieve these goals, he revived his high school newspaper. He became the newspaper's editor, the business manager, and performed charitable deeds and volunteered in the community. After years of hard work and determination, Dan was accepted to Harvard. He graduated Harvard magna cum laude, went on to study at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem for 1 year, and then earned a master's of philosophy in political theory from Emmanuel College at the University of Cambridge in England. He returned thereafter to Harvard Law School to earn his law degree and went on to become an extremely successful lawyer, an influential legal scholar. Danny served as a law clerk for a federal judge, worked as an associate at a prestigious law firm in Washington, D.C., and then secured a teaching position at FSU College of Law. In a few short years, Dan became a full tenured law professor before the tender age of 41. Quite unusual. Dan co-authored a book and published many articles in highly regarded law journals and newspapers like the New York Times. Dan's work was influential and he gave lectures and presented at universities around the world. Although Dan was fond of his Canadian roots, he was very dedicated to the FSU Law School and the Tallahassee community. He was recognized as a scholar who contributed and made a difference in the world. While Dan's career was important to him, family meant everything to Dan. Danny's marriage produced two boys, Benjamin and Lincoln, who were his absolute world and the love of his life. Dan arranged his entire life around these two boys. He would arrange his teaching schedule, travel plans, exercise, activities, all around his desire to spend as much time as possible with his two boys. He would meet them for breakfast at their preschool. He would sit in the middle of the circle with Benjamin and Lincoln and all the other classmates to tell stories, read, or sing songs as they ate breakfast. Benjamin and Lincoln were his pride and joy and meant absolutely everything to him. Dan made sure that he and the boys came to Montreal and Toronto to attend every family affair and visit with all the extended Markel family, including grandparents, uncles, aunts, and many numerous cousins. Despite the distance, Dan felt that the boys had to know and be a part of family. Dan also made sure that he and the boys participated in the Tallahassee community and they were involved in the local synagogue. Dan left home at the young age of 17 to go to Harvard, but he always came home for summer vacations, holidays, and all family functions. Danny and I, despite the fact we lived quite far apart, regularly communicated through text, emails, and phone calls. Despite this physical distance, as time moved on, we grew ever so much closer. At Dan's suggestion, we would plan to talk and have a meal together. At the appointed day and time, we each would prepare a meal, set our tables with the tablet in the middle, and over Skype, we would sit together and enjoy each other's company for a couple of hours despite the actual distance. Dan's life was abruptly cut short, and he was forever taken from me, his boys, and the rest of our family, and all his many friends and colleagues. My life has been in total disarray since Dan's murder. Many nights I wake up in the middle of the night in a terrible sweat with thoughts of Dan's murder and all that has happened. There's not a single day in my life since Danny's death that in one way or another, he does not enter into my thoughts, and I miss him with all my heart. I'm constantly reminded of Dan's murder and his absence. When I meet new people, the topic of discussion always comes up when they ask whether I have children. How do I respond? It is difficult to put into words the hideous acts that took Danny away from us. the unthinkable pain I must live with every single day. Losing a son or daughter is something I wish nobody should have to experience. It's not in the order of nature. Danny is never coming back. We continue to hope and pray for justice and a return to normality of seeing and playing a vital role in the lives of our two grandsons, Ben and Lincoln. It has been a number of years since I last wrote victim impact statements, sharing how Danny's death has affected me. Despite our persistent efforts, we still do not have a real relationship with Danny's sons, Ben and Lincoln. Visits are limited and very controlled. For 6 years, we were denied any and all visits with the boys. In the last 2 years, I've been permitted two 60 to 90-minute visits, supervised visits. This limited contact is incredibly painful, and I feel like they've been cut out of our lives. Not only have I lost my son, but I have effectively lost two of my grandkids as well. Even their family names have been changed from Markel to Adelson. While we work hard to help introduce a new bill in the state of Florida known as the Marquel Act, which gives grandparents important rights, unfortunately, our relationship with Ben and Lincoln has not been, and I couldn't understand what he said at the end. As this bill was coming to fruition, there was a lot of negative publicity and press and media of Danny's ex-wife, Wendi. In my opinion, Wendi was focused on improving her public image and, as a result, extended an invitation to us to Ben's bar mitzvah. Ruth and I were invited to attend only the ceremonial part of this important stage in a Jewish boy's life, and we were not invited to participate in any reception typical of this celebration. This invitation opened the door to one of the limited visits described above. In order to not overwhelm Ben and Lincoln on this important day, we asked to arrange a meeting before the bar mitzvah in order to make things easier on the boys. While we hadn't been allowed to visit in years, we were able to arrange a brief 90-minute supervised visit with Ben and Lincoln, and this would be a few weeks before the bar mitzvah. However, immediately after our brief visit, Charlie was arrested and Wendi rescinded our invitation to the bar mitzvah. At the time, she said they were either going to postpone or completely cancel this bar mitzvah ceremony. Neither of those happened. Instead, my understanding is that the Adelsons went on to have the bar mitzvah ceremony and party, all without the Markel family's presence or participation. Missing out on this important part of Ben's life was incredibly painful. After so many years without Danny, we hope to make progress in forging a consistent relationship with his sons, but this still has many challenges. This is the year that Lincoln turns 13, the age of bar mitzvah. As yet, we have not been informed if and when he will have a bar mitzvah, nor if we will be invited to participate in this very important time of Lincoln's life. I have very little hope that we will be allowed to participate in this important life cycle event. Dan's murder brought his life abruptly to an end for no sensible reason and has affected a countless number of people. The legal community is deprived of Dan's wisdom and ideas, which made the world a better place. Dan's students are deprived of the experience of having Dan as a brilliant professor and caring mentor, showing them a path. Dan's colleagues can no longer benefit from Dan's friendship, insights, and scholarly discussion. Ruth and I have been deprived of our son, who has been taken away from us so suddenly and totally against life's schedule. Ben and Lincoln must go through their life without their father, who loved them with all his being. The boys have been deprived of their father's entire family after Dan's murder. We have no idea what these boys know or have been told about Danny's death. I truly believe they have been brainwashed in all these years from the ages of 3 and 4 years to the present day. I also have no idea what the boys know of us, the entire Markel family, history, etc., and especially how much we all love them and wish they were an active part of our family. Both Ruth and I are approaching 80 years of age. At this moment, we are healthy, but one does not know what tomorrow brings. The wheels of justice turn very, very slowly, but so far, we're grateful that they are still turning. We're very grateful to Tallahassee law enforcement, to the state attorney and all their staff, to all our relatives and friends, including the hundreds of Danny's friends and colleagues from around the world, for their constant support over these long 10 years, to all the podcasters who work hard to keep alive this unbelievable story. We are waiting for Benjamin and Lincoln to have a more normal relationship with the Markel family as we wait in pain and anguish. The Adelson family, in particular, Charlie Adelson, has been a major cause of our heartbreak and the murder of our son Danny and the loss of our two grandsons. I've suffered tremendously, and we as a family continue to suffer. It is satisfying to see justice being done, and it would be appropriate to ask for the maximum sentence for the perpetrators of Danny's murder. Thank you. Today is a good day. It's unfathomable to think about losing a child and to lose a child knowing it was the choice of another just has to add a whole different layer of heartbreak. So, a lot of people have asked what would happen if Wendi were to be arrested? What would happen to the boys? Well, until Wendi's parental rights are terminated, Wendi would have sole decision making authority over those boys. 100%. She could leave them with their dad, Harvey, as long as he's not arrested, or any friends in Florida that may know the boys and be willing to take them in. I really don't see a snowball chance that she would allow the Markels to have the boys in the event of her arrest if that ever happens. If she's ever convicted of Dan's murder, then she would lose her parental rights. I think the Adelsons would fight them from prison. But Dan's family is responsible for getting the Marquel Act passed in Florida. And the Marquel Act amends Florida law to create a rebuttable presumption for granting a reasonable visitation with a petitioning grandparent or step grandparent under certain circumstances. Under the bill, if the court finds that one parent of a child has been held criminally liable for the death of the other parent or civilly liable for an intentional tort causing the death of the other parent, a rebuttable presumption arises that the grandparent who is the parent of the child's deceased parent is entitled to reasonable visitation with the grandchild. The presumption may be overcome only if the court finds the visitation is not in the child's best interest and the bill does not distinguish between biological grandparents and step grandparents. I think it's a really amazing thing that they did because even if this doesn't come to benefit the Markels, I think going through what they've been through in the almost 10 years since Dan's murder, they would never want another set of grandparents to ever have to feel the pain they felt of that absence of the only living things that are connected to Dan, which are his sons. Let's look at some actions taken by Wendi right after Dan's murder. We know the relocation was a very hot topic. The judge did that with prejudice, meaning that Wendi could not petition for that again. There were other things still unlitigated at the time of Dan's murder. But Wendi moved back to Miami with the boys around 48 hours after Dan's murder. She was asked about this at Sigfredo Garcia's trial. She said after Dan's murder, she packed a weekend bag and went for what she thought would be a couple of days or a week, but she never came back to Tallahassee permanently. Not long after she moved to South Florida, she got a place within walking distance to her parents' house. Then, within a year of Dan's murder, Wendi changed the boy's last name from Markel to Adelson. Now, at Sigfredo's trial, Wendi was asked by prosecutor Kappelman about this. Wendi said after Dan's murder, there was a lot of press coverage, and CNN actually put photos of her boys' faces unblurred on national television. And also, the newspapers put their names out there without any consideration to the fact that they're children. Kappelman says, I appreciate that, but when did you change their names? And Wendi said that when they started school in South Florida, she registered them under her name, hoping it would keep them safe. She says she registered Ben for school shortly after Dan's murder, but didn't legally change their name until around a year after. But get this, she also changed Ben's middle name, which was in honor of Dan's deceased maternal grandmother. Wendi said that A in Ben's middle name honored her deceased grandfather, Aaron, and then the rest of the name was to honor Danny's grandmother. And then Wendi points out, so we both lost an honor to our family members. She changed his middle name apparently to the name of an Adelson family member that's deceased. At the retrial of Catherine Magbanawa, her attorney asked Wendi about Ben's bar mitzvah and asked if she invited Dan's parents. She said she did. And then she was asked when was the last time they saw the boys face to face. And she said just recently, which would have been around April of 2022. It was not long after Charlie was arrested. A lot of people feel like the reason that Wendi allowed the Markels to finally see the boys is just to make her look good, make her public image look better. She was testifying in these trials. It was something that was coming up and it was making her look bad, as it should. There is no excuse to alienate these boys from Dan's parents ever. And her reasoning is stupid. When the attorney asked if it had been years since they last saw them. She said until they threatened to put them in foster care. This is during the retrial of Catherine Magbanawa, by the way. Catherine's attorney says, but you let them see your brother Charlie, who's sitting in jail for first-degree murder. Wendi fires back, well, they can't see him now, can they? Catherine's attorney says, I'll ask you the questions. Well, what's the deal with Dan and Wendy's son not being able to see them? Dan's mother, Ruth, sent an email to Prosecutor Kappelman about having something lined up in the event the Adelsons were arrested, which would have the boys placed in a Jewish foster care until other arrangements could be made and the Markels could get to Florida. At Charlie's trial, the prosecutor said just like that, their father was effectively erased from their lives at 3 and 4. And the Adelson family, their big problem had been solved, meaning the relocation could now be done without opposition, and then erasing him from their lives by changing their last name. That last little bit of their dad that they had to hold on to. And you think about it, that also ensured that from Dan's side, there would be no future generations named Markel, but there would be for Adelson. Sick. It's just disgusting. It's stomach turning if you think about how vindictive. And it makes no sense for Wendi to change their last name. I mean, at this point, are you going to change it back to Markel? Because the Adelson family name is pretty much mud as far as the 4 of them go. You know, I'm not speaking about her brother who lives in New York, who is separated from this family. He's not guilty by DNA default. Bless his heart. I really feel for him and his family and his children. You know, the other grandkids that Donna don't seem to obsess about, including Charlie's. Wendi was asked at Sigfredo's trial about the Markels not being allowed to see the boys. She said in the 2 years after Danny's murder that they did see the boys, but after 2016, they were not permitted to see the boys. Now, this moved over into Charlie's trial about Ruth trying to make arrangements in the event the Adelsons were arrested. Wendi said, I don't think it's kind to put my kids in foster care. Prosecutor Kappelman asked if that was only in place until Ruth could get on a plane and get to Florida. Wendi said Ruth never said that. The prosecutor asks, so you thought she was just going to leave the boys in foster care, meaning forever? Wendi says, I don't know what to think. They have a mother. They don't need to be in foster care. Kappelman says, well, they wouldn't have a mother in the event of your arrest. Wendi kind of squirms in her seat when she says that. And then Kappelman says, wasn't that the intention of the email? Wendi says, I don't know what the intent of the email was. I wasn't going to be arrested for a crime I didn't commit. Well, Ms. Kappelman makes a good point and says, well, Ruth did not know that, did she? This all was fresh. Wendi says, I don't know what she knows or doesn't know. Can't speak to that. This was 2 years after Danny's murder. I know my kids don't belong in foster care. Kappelman asked if this was a specific foster care she would call so the kids wouldn't go into the custody of the state. And Wendi says she did suggest a specific foster care. Kappelman points out it's a Jewish foster care, and Wendi says yes. Kappelman asked Wendi how many times the boys visited Dan's parents since his murder. Wendi says, oh, many. It would be hard to count. And Kappelman essentially looks like she wants to fall over and says, countless times? And Wendi nods in agreement and says, countless times. Well, Kappelman kind of laughs to herself and writes on her notepad. Kappelman asks, how many times have they seen them in the last year? And Wendi says, we had a visit with Danny's dad and a cousin of the boys this summer, and we have a lot of Skype visits. She says they do live in Canada, so it makes it a little bit harder to have in-person visitation. But every time they've asked for it, we've arranged it. Kappelman's eyebrows shoot up. And she says, every time they've asked for a visit, you've arranged it? Wendi says, yes, ma'am. Kappelman asks, how many times have they seen him in the past 5 years? Wendi says again. Kappelman interrupts and says, countless? Wendi says that overlaps with the time they tried to put them in foster care. Since we've reestablished relations, we've seen them about twice a year whenever they come to Florida. She saw one little in to twist it and make it something it wasn't to justify her reasons for removing these boys out of the Markels' lives along with their name. This is a twisted family. Ultimately, Kappelman's trying to nail Wendi down to a number of how many visits. And she says, so in the last 5 years, they've seen them 2 to 3 times a year. And Wendi says, yeah, about that. Kappelman asks if the Markels having access to the kids has been a big issue. She said the issue of them trying to put them in foster care was a major issue. Kappelman says, no, ma'am, that's not my question. She repeats the question about access to the kids being a major issue, at least for the Markels. And Wendy says since they tried to put the children in foster care, yes. But before that, it wasn't a problem. Now, backtracking to Sigfredo's trial, Kappelman reiterates to Wendy that this was only in the event Wendy and her parents were arrested. And that was only going to be to allow enough time for the Markels to come to Florida. Wendy says, but there's no event in which I would be unable to care for them. That feels like trying to take away my children. Kappelman asks if Wendy is familiar with the Markels' work to get legislation passed for grandparent rights. What does Wendy say? She says she is aware and it's actually unconstitutional. But you know what, girl? It passed. That's it for today. I really wanted for people who aren't familiar with this case, kind of like me, learning as I go, to understand not only have the Markels lost their son in such a brutal, senseless way, they've had their grandkids ripped from their lives with the dumbest excuse ever. In 2016, you think about it, that's when these arrests started happening. So, what does Wendy do? When Ruth understandably gets concerned about knowing Catherine Magbanowa is the middleman between Charlie Adelson and these hitmen. There's no way the whole family doesn't know. I'm sure in Ruth's mind, she's thinking they're all about to go down. We're having these arrests. 3 people arrested. Wendy takes that, and it's probably not so much that she was mad about in the event of arrest, but just mad that Ruth even thought the Adelsons could have been involved. But what have we found out in these years since this has passed? Charlie was just convicted and sentenced just yesterday to life in prison for arranging the hit on Dan Markel. That's it for today. I hope you guys have a good rest of your afternoon. We will see you soon.